Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the Christmas edition of the Fat Jockey podcast. As you can see, there's only Jono and myself this week. Kev let us know at pretty late notice that he's too busy to come on the podcast. Apparently, a few small things have got in the way. And given the late notice, we were pretty concerned about it, and particularly thought it'd be worth checking out. And it turns out he's currently in his blow-up hot tub with 3 L's and a large barrel of mulled wine. So, and also since you watched that film, the one that was the inspiration to buy his hot tub, he's been totally convinced that time machines really exist. But as Jono said to me, he must already have one because looking at him, he always seems to go back 4 seconds. So anyway, enough frivolity. Let's get down to the serious business, Jono. Last week we covered the Christmas hurdles. We're going to do the Christmas chases this week. And along the way, we're going to answer hopefully the questions that you guys have posed. So, Johnny, you're going to kick us off with the Racing Post Novices chase, but I think before we do that, just what do you make of the appreciated news this week? Were you happy with the way the news came out? What about how quickly Cash Out disappeared? That seems to be a recurring theme, and I suppose the other thing is he backable for the Champion Hurdle?
Yeah, hammer blow, really. To be honest, I'm probably more annoyed at myself because I think you had a couple of days really. The signs without the Christmas entries. Obviously, didn't get the 2 mile beginner chase entry. I was umming and ahhing whether to cash out. Didn't. I was busy with work. Kind of when it all hit. I think it was pretty close to when he didn't get that middle distance beginner's chase entry, and then I think it kind of kicked off from there. Probably more annoyed at myself for not cashing out, but then the flip side of that is I think I'd always rather be more annoyed at not cashing out than cashing out. Because sometimes you just these rumours. I know you were heavily invested in him, and I mean, if you had cleared all that, cashed out what you could, and then it came to nothing, I mean, I guess you'd be fuming. I don't think there was anything too dodgy about it. I know people like to
I agree.
Like to say, kind of obviously took a bit of a walk on the exchange, but I think you can't really moan at this one. They were quick to get the news out. I'd be slightly wary about. I've backed him for the Champion Hurdle. I've not gone mad. I think it was as big as 14-1 following the announcement. William Hill had him at 12 for a while. I went in a small bit there, but I think, if you look at the wording, it's quite vague. Obviously, when he's ready to return, he'll have a hurdles campaign. So there's no name checking of the Champion Hurdle. He's on the easy list. I think if they can get a run into him in the Red Mills, maybe. But the owners, they did it with carefully selected in his novice hurdle campaign. He had some setbacks. They didn't rush him for Cheltenham. The owners are big fans of Punchestown, and I'm kind of 50-50 to whether they're actually going to get him for the festival in March. Obviously, it'd be great to see. I think the race needs it. But yeah, there's too much to go. Too kind of ballsy, I think, on his chances. He's got to improve anyway against a superstar mare. He's obviously got this history of niggles now, dating back to kind of April time. How bad they are, we don't know. But I think huge shame for, I know you as well, both really fancied him for the Arkle. It's just a bit of a rubbish news. I mean, we get it all the time every year. I think last year was a bit of an exception. Felt like everything kind of fell to place last year. This is probably the first hammer blow of probably more to come. But how about you?
Yeah, look, I'm reasonably philosophical about these things, if I'm honest. It goes with the territory. If we play the anti-post game, then these things are going to happen. Whilst he was a heavy loss for me, more so in multiples than singles, if I'm honest. But I took something like a 300-point hitter overall, a shade more in actual fact. So that's not insignificant. But my style is to make a book. So other horses slot in behind him. It now puts me in a very good position with Fernie Hollow, for example. The backup horses move up the chain. The likes of Edwardstone, Riviere de Tell. What else have we got in there? Third Time Lucky, one or two others, I think. So my book actually looks really good despite that happening as far as the race itself is concerned. And as far as multiples are concerned, I just take that on the chin, amongst everything else. So as far as, the news is concerned, I don't kick myself. These things happen. I thought about the sort of Benedict situation last year because all the signs were there. Maybe I should have followed the signs this year. But as you said, you're absolutely on the money. If I'd have cashed out that and everything was okay, that is significantly worse than not cashing out and him being out. So yeah, I'm okay with it. The one thing that's definitely certain that the cash out firms are really on the ball this year, more so than I've ever known. It wouldn't have made a difference to me this time. I was stuffed in meetings, didn't actually pick the news up until mid-late afternoon. And the news was out around lunchtime, I think. So I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it anyway. And I'm normally reasonably good. I'm reasonably well connected. I'm reasonably good at picking information up and generally get out if I can. But every season I'm going to get caught with something. And it's unusual not to get caught on something significant. It's happened early this year. And in some respects that's better because it allows you to adjust your position rather than, the late, 11th hour news where you kind of pretty much stuff. The prices have all crashed the floor anyway. There's not a lot of movement, and bookies are taking no chances at all. So it is what it is. It's a shame for the race, I think. It's a shame for the racing fan. But as punters, I think it's just one we take on the chin. Hopefully we'll see him back. Can't back him for the Champion Hurdle. I think you made the point that, it's not a race he's likely to win anyway. So, yeah, maybe if you picked him up at 12s, 14s, then maybe there's a case for dropping him in your book as a bit of a safety net. But, if you didn't pick him up at that price, then definitely not. And I'm not entirely sure I would have done anyway. On reflection, I think I would have just given him a swerve. There's no specific words to say they're going to have him back for the Champion Hurdle, that's their intention. I've read that. I quite like trying to read between the lines with the statements that come out of Willie Mullins and anybody around the yard, and that doesn't suggest to me that they're rushing him back. It's more a case of they'd like him to be back, and if he is going to be back, it will be over hurdles, and it's going to be somewhere towards the end of the season. So I think we just take it on the chin and move on, and hopefully, a different superstar's born. So, okay, look, let's kick off with the two big novice chases that were raised in the forum, in the questions on the forum. First one, I think, is the Racing Post Novices Chase. You're going to cover that, and I'm going to cover the Cato Stone Novices Chase. So do you want to kick us off? Craig in particular actually asked, does Fernie become a real Arkle contender, or will the bubble burst conceding £13 to Riviere de Tell?
Yeah, it's a fair bit of weight he's got to give away. I think, I wouldn't be backing him odds on. I think currently she's 7-4. He can get, I think he's 8-13 Fernie Hollow in some places.
Yeah,
I think in a weird way, this might be his hardest test of the whole season, Fernie Hollow. I think just the timing of it, obviously the weight allowance. I think he's up against a mare that will test him. I think long term, we know that we had a podcast, our first podcast was kind of all about the kind of talent that Fernie Hollow has, the kind of raw ability. It's no question, I think, who is the better horse, who will probably be the one we talk about in a year, 2 years' time. But yeah, I think he's got a very tough race on his hands. On the evidence we've seen so far, it's point to point. He wasn't the slickest jumper, and he started off his chase debut not particularly the best jumper either. Did warm up to the task, and where you want to see a horse really jump well is at the kind of business end of the race, and he did that in fairness. So when kind of push came to shove, that's what you wanted to see. And I mean, he was off for over a year, so again, I think you can kind of excuse a bit of rustiness. And end of the day, they're novice chasers, so I think sometimes we get a bit spoiled. I mean, you take someone like Monkfish last season, who was just actually there was a batch of novice chasers last season that I think it was kind of out of the norm. You had the likes of Shishkin, Enigami, Envoy Allen, Monkfish. You just had these novices that just picked it up, just bang, bang, bang. Looked like they'd been chasing all their life. Whereas, yeah, probably this season we've seen a bit of the opposite, where you've had the likes of Fernie Hollow, Bob Ollinger, bundles of kind of talent and ability, but just maybe a bit sketchy in the jumping department. But we'll probably improve. But yeah, back to this race. It wouldn't be the first time that there's been a Mullins hot pot turned over. He's obviously had some big winners. Vautour was turned over. Champagne Fever, Lorena, they were all heavily kind of backed favourites in the race. He has had the likes of Footpad and Min and Duvan also win the race for him, but it's kind of a mixed, kind of a bit of a checkered history actually.
Yeah, it is.
With the race.
Yeah, I looked at it. It is exactly that.
And we know, I mean, Fernie's obviously had the run, and I do expect most of his runners to improve from their kind of beginner's chase, same with the maiden hurdles, but it still isn't the kind of Willie Mullins peak time of year. He's not going to be too despondent about horses at Christmas time.
Well, look, I agree. I don't think you want him to win that race. I think that's
I think I would. Yeah, exactly. I think if you can get 74, definitely 2-1 on Riviere de Tel, I think that probably is the bet. I would hope Fernie Hollow wins. I mean, the Arkle market's going to go berserk if he gets turned over. On the flip side, I think the context of him getting beat as well. Obviously, that weight allowance isn't going to be the same come March. If this race was, in 3-4 months' time, when Fernie Hollow's had a couple more chase runs under his belt, not so much weight to give away, I think I'd be far more confident on him. I just think everything's kind of stacked. Everything's stacked in Riviere de Tel's favour. You've got her chasing experience, her jumping has been better. She's got the weight allowance, and I think she's never going to have a better time. Obviously, I think it's why Elliott's running her. Make the most of the weight allowance, try and get Fernie in trouble. And yeah, I think I want to see Fernie Hollow win. I've backed him for the Arc, especially after the Appreciate news, like we said. But yeah, we could have a big old shock on our hand. At least the market could have a shock, I'd say.
Yeah, look, it's interesting, wasn't it? I agree with pretty much all of that. It's. I think whatever price either of them are, I don't think I'll have a bet in the race. I don't think there's too much to gain for me by having a bet in the race. But there's a lot to learn from it. And the intrigue is, is he capable of giving £13 away to what is clearly a very useful novice mare? She jumps really well. She's possibly been about the best of the novice chasers around over fences, if I'm really honest. Well, certainly over the shorter trips. Brave Man's Game possibly would be in the same bracket from his chasing debut, but she's looked really good over fences. As you say, she's got that bit of extra experience as well. Fernie wasn't the slickest, I suppose, first time around, although he did warm to the task, I thought, and got better as the race went on. And he'll learn from that, and you expect him to be a bit better this time around. But I do think, £13 is probably going to be more telling in the jumping stakes than, between the fences. If I'm honest, I think he can give that £13 away because I think he's a proper tool. But he's got to jump as well. And I think it will all come down to his jumping. And I think trying to second guess that for the day there's no point really. So it's a watch and learn job. Can he give £13 to her? If he can't, is he going to be okay giving £7 to her in March? And to be honest, whether he wins or doesn't get beaten too far, I don't think the bookies will do too much about it. They'll probably shorten her up and leave him alone, I suspect, because they'll understand the context of the race.
Yeah.
I think he'd have to be beaten tidily for them to react. I think that's my feel on the race, but it's one of the races that I'm most looking forward to over the Christmas period, and albeit it's a complete match, it's just one of the most intriguing, really.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Cato Star Novices, which also looks like a bit of a match, really. I'm guessing 300 through 5 is going to skip it. I can't have Kiltilly, Briggs, Millsbank and T Clipper. They're not good enough. They're not anywhere near the other two. So it feels like a race that's between Hoysenor and Braveman's Game. And both of them look like proper chasers to me. The Braveman's Game just looks like a typical Nichols chase that's so well scored, so well looked after. It's just everything's been leading up to him jumping his first fence, really. And I think, Britain's got two very good ones there that can give Ireland a run for their money, which probably won't happen too often in the 28 races in March. But these two are players, I think. In the context of the race itself, I don't think I'd be totally shocked if Braveman's Game won it. I think as a test, Kempton probably suits him and will suit him a little bit better of the two. I think he's probably a bit more about speed than a Hoysenor, but a Hoysenor, that's a horrible word, two words to try and get out. He doesn't lack pace himself, to be fair. He jumps and gallops, and I don't think Braveman's Game is going to be in a position to be burning him off. But again, I think it might be a race that could potentially come down to jumping. If the Hoysenor is turned over, I don't think it would put me off completely for the Brown Advisor. I don't think it would bother me too much unless, he was beaten badly. I think I'd rather they dropped him in trip and gone to the Dipper on New Year's Day. I know the 2.5 is not necessarily something that's in his wheelhouse, but, he's probably going to go a similar pace around Kempton than he would the 2.5 miles around Cheltenham. And I'd have quite liked him to have got a bit of experience around Cheltenham before March, but that's not to be. I don't know. I think hard to call. I'm in the Hoysenor camp for March, but I think it's hard to call in this. I still think a Hoysenor might win it if he jumps well enough. And we know he can jump like a stag, but he's probably got a mistake in him as well. But again, I don't think I'd be upset if he was beaten a couple of lengths either. So, again, it's one to watch and learn from, I think. There was a question asked.
How do you see the...
Go on, John.
So, how do you see the kind of tactics playing out? I mean, Braveman's Game, I feel like he's had kind of an easy lead on his 2, right? He's looked exceptional as a jumper, but personally, I don't think he's been tested at any point. So I'm actually really keen to see how he's going to jump upside. Do you think a Hoysenor is going to kind of let him go, or do you think they might take the lead?
I think I don't think he'll let him go and make his own pace if a Hoysenor wants to go quicker. But I think he'll be happy to let him. I think he'll be happy to take the lead as long as a Hoysenor is going a reasonable gallop. That's how I feel about it. And then it will come to those that could come down to which one can go the gallop best, which one can jump the best, and which one sees it out going at that pace. They both appear to have those kind of attributes. So it's a difficult one to call, really. I'd certainly take a Hoysenor, around a more stamina stamina test at Cheltenham. But to be fair, the old course is sharp. It's sharp enough. So ideally, I still want to see him win it. It could well be that they meet again in March, and tactics is the key. But you can look back at that novice hurdle at Aintree and at Hoyson, or just galloped all over Braveman's Game. He's clearly under the bonnet the better horse. I hope he gets the opportunity to show that both here and in March. There was a question actually from Appreciate It on the forum, who feels that Braveman's Game is a certainty in this, but is more of a marsh horse than the Brown Advisory Novices, and he asked for our thoughts on that. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very interesting question, actually, and my gut feeling is actually I could see him being a marsh horse over an RSA, Festival Novice Chase. I call it RSA. However, you've got one glaring issue there, and you've got Bob Ollinger. So I think for all Braveman's Game might suit the marsh trip, especially kind of forcing the pace, going out in front. One, I don't think Nichols will want to take on Bob Ollinger. Now, obviously, we don't know how the next few months go. If Bob Ollinger has a slight setback or whatever, or doesn't quite look the superstar that he does currently. But I just keep coming back to, is it going to be Bob Ollinger? And I just can't see that Ballymore form getting reversed.
No, I think it could be actually a bit simpler than that. I think if Braveman's Game wins here, then why wouldn't you go to the Brown Advisory Novice Chase? And if he gets turned over, is he going to be good enough to beat Bob Ollinger anyway? That's a question before this race. It becomes an even bigger question. It becomes a massive question mark after the race if he's beaten in this. So do they go to Aintree instead? And there's a part of me thinks he either goes to the Brown Advisory or he goes to Aintree, and he doesn't drop back in trip. Because I can't see why you'd be running in this race if you were planning on going back in trip. Doesn't actually make that much sense, really. That doesn't necessarily make him a Gold Cup horse in 12 months' time. 3 miles 2 is a different test than on the new course, is a different test than 3 miles on the old course. So, but it's not much stiffer than Kempton as a race. And I think it's worth bearing that in mind. People forget the two courses around Cheltenham are very different, and the old course is not particularly hard. It's not. It's a fairly sharp course. Yes, you've got the undulations, you've got the hill, but it's still pretty sharp. So I think maybe it's either they go to the Brown Advisory Novices Chase or skip it completely. To be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, thinking about it, it's kind of Nichols' MO, isn't it, at the moment? If he's got a horse good enough, they go to the festival. If not, they skip for Aintree. And even if they're good enough, sometimes it's a question mark. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Okay, Savills. So that's shaping up like a decent race as well. And there's plenty we're going to learn from that. Actually, before you tackle it, there's a question from Fahim Machine who wants to know if Galvin can enhance his Gold Cup claims, and I'm guessing you're probably going to cover that anyway.
Start on Galvin. Absolutely, I think he's earned his kind of company in that division now. I know we all kind of thought of him as I know Fahim especially, as he was a national horse for April, cross country en route, and nice and simple, job done. Mr. Elliott's had other ideas, he was barely beaten last time by Frodon. He's only is he only 7 years old, I think. So
yeah, be 18. I think.
Yeah, 8 in March. He's got a brilliant festival record, and he kind of stepped up to Grade 1 company earlier on this season. So I think he's 5-1 currently at the moment in the race. If you wanted to do a kind of a muggy each way or get a bit of a each way accumulator going over Christmas, that 3 places looks very fair to me. I think the Savills has quite a few horses with question marks, and he just looks rock solid, really. Every reason to think he'll run his race. I know kind of good ground has been suggested for what he needs, but his run last time was on soft ground. I don't think it's going to be as much rain to really affect his chances. And yeah, I fully expect him to run a fine race, place whether that's whichever kind of position that is in the race, and then probably be put away, ready for March. Yeah, I don't see any way he really harms his chances for the Gold Cup. I think looking at the other kind of potential lineup in the race, I think actually it's worth, if you want a bet in the race, it's worth doing it now, because I'm pretty sure you're just going to get the 2 places come the day. There's 12 currently entered, but we know 3 of them go to King George. That's Manila Indo, Tornado Flyer, Asterion Phalange. And then you've got the likes of Sam Crow, Franco de Paul, Battle Over Doyen, which are all question marks. But yeah, I would expect 6 to 7 runners on the day, so you get your 2 places. So I would definitely, if you want to bet, try and get those 3 places now. You've also got the added kind of benefit that even though it's confirmed, you've got Manila Indo, especially, and Asterion Phalange still fairly prominent in the market. So once they go, which is a foregone conclusion, everything will just get trimmed slightly. In terms of who else is interesting, I know Cuvega on the forum, he's put up Janadil as a potential shortener for the Gold Cup. Currently available 40 to 1 with cash out. I haven't backed him. I'm kind of toying with it. I can see the angle, definitely. There's no real harm in the bet. Worst case, you're probably losing 50% of your stake, and that's if they're pushing out wildly. Might be someone I add, but yeah, still debate about. I'm still not convinced he's a stayer.
I'm the same, by the way. I can see him. I'd more see him as a Ryanair horse than a Gold Cup horse, if I'm honest.
Yeah, Mullins, he chucked him in the Albert Bartlett, didn't he, early on? And I just...
And he was beaten a long way in that race, by the way. He's 4th, but he was beaten 20 lengths or something ridiculous.
I mean, that was a serious Albert Bartlett, but he just, didn't in any way make you think he stayed.
No, not at all.
That was the year he had all sorts of handicap entries, wasn't it? I think he could have gone County, Coral, and yeah, Mullins chucked him in the Albert Bartlett as a bit of a shock.
In fact, he was 5th, wasn't he? Because it was the 4 of them finishing the heat, Monkfish,
that was it,
Exhibition and Time Hill. So, but he was just nowhere really, and it was completely outpaced in a race that he didn't look to stay in. So,
exactly.
That for me didn't scream future Gold Cup winner, but horses are entitled to improve and mature and all the rest of it. So, that's probably a little bit unfair because, he took the leap from 2 miles straight to 3. So, but I still just feel that at this stage, the Ryanair would probably suit him better.
It's also it's kind of, you've got kind of 2 levels, haven't you? You've got 3 miles around Leopardstown. He's got to prove that for me. And then you've got the added jump. All right, you've done 3 miles around Leopardstown. Can you then do 3 mile 2 in the Gold Cup? And I don't see him having that kind of elevated step up. I mean, a bit boring for me. I've made it clear I'm a massive Aputar fan. He should win. It'll be disappointing if he doesn't. Basically, he's odds on. He's probably going to get even shorter. I think he'll be seen as a bit of a banker. Just one interesting point. It's not a negative, but he's won 3 times in his career over fences. Maybe just double check that. But he's actually only won 3 times over fences. once for the last 3 seasons. So he's never actually, he's consistent in the sense of always runs his race, generally places. But yeah, he's never actually put a string of ones to his name, never backed it up. It's quite a lightly raced, generally only runs kind of 3 times a season, but I just thought it was quite interesting, actually.
He's ultra consistent, isn't he? I think he's never been out of the places. I was looking at his profile 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's never been out of the places, so he's ultra consistent. But one thing that seems to have happened with him, he's got better now. He's been pushed up in trip. The improvements really coincided with him going 3 miles plus. And I think the biggest thing of all is just that round of jumping at Haydock. I thought he was exceptional from a horse that's in the past been sticky and had a mistake in him. He looks a different horse. And he won this race last year, and he made a mistake that could have cost him last year. If he puts a round of jumping in like he did at Haydock, I don't think they'll see which way he goes, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
If you think, Kemboy and Mellon were pretty close to him last season in this same race, and actually, just based on what you're saying there, which is a really good point, back in now for 3 places, those two are probably the value at sort of 10s and 14s or whatever they are. It's each way bets because they're going to act and perform around the course and distance, whereas you can probably have a few question marks around some of the others. They'd be the ones that I'd perhaps be pointing at for each way bets. I can see the attraction maybe just throwing Galvin in some Christmas multiples. I actually quite like that idea, really. But I just think, the same as you, I think Plutard just wins this.
Yeah, to me, just unless he has an off day, I just don't see a negative. I can't pick a hole in him for this race. Yeah. But spot on, actually, with what I did come down to is if I was to have a bet in the race, it'd be 10-1 Kemboy, 3 places, came second last year. I actually forgot how much of a winner he looked in that race. I hadn't watched it since live, and he just until the final few yards when Aplutar just came there absolutely flying at the finish. Yeah, Kemboy just looked his race. I don't know what he was trading at, but he was the winner just up until the final few yards. The Racing Post comments, interestingly, because I read them first before watching the race, said that Kemboy hit the last. And I thought, I'll see that, see how much it hindered him. Weirdly, he didn't actually hit the last. I don't really know where they got that from. But he's actually, his form at Leopardstown is a 2-1-4-2-2. So he's placed 4 times, won there and came 4th. And that 4th was a bunched finish, only beaten 3 lengths. So loves the track. These races are his kind of Gold Cup. We know come the spring, he certainly at Cheltenham, he doesn't really have a chance. And generally by Punchestown, I know he's got history there, but I think nowadays, 9 years old, I don't think that's his time of the year. But I think Christmas time, Leopardstown, yeah, absolutely. I think 10-1, 3 places. This is a good bet. The only kind of worry I'd have is whether the John Durkin, how much of a hard race that left. Allaho was off his feet and won. Half the field were kind of stretched out, a bit like Allaho's Ryanair. So maybe worry just whether that's left a mark. If you're really concerned, you could potentially wait for Asterion Flonge and Tornado Flyer to run at Kempton a couple of days before. That might kind of help you kind of settle. If they were kind of tailed off and just looked to run no race, you could say, I might leave the John Durkin runners, but you're obviously losing the 3 places. So, yeah, that would be I'd kind of go 2 angles here. I think Aplutar wins, but it's just not a betting proposition. So I would go 10-1 Kenboy 3 places, and then potentially stick Galvin in a couple of cheeky little 5-1 each ways, again getting the 3 places, because you're probably looking at maybe 7-2 Galvin by the time the kind of field gets declared, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Just with Kenboy, I'm not too concerned about that last race. I think he was beaten too far out. He just looked as though he needed it. I think it probably was as basic as that. And I think the other point that you make, and I'm going to make a similar one with a couple of horses shortly with the King George. This is Kenboy's Cup final. A Plutar, Galvin. They're not going to leave their Gold Cup behind in this, are they? They'll be ready enough, but they are not going to be, the 110% that you have them at Cheltenham. Whereas Kenboy, this is his race. Then he'll get wound down again, and then he'll be wound back up again for Punchestown. So, I can see him going close again, just like last year. I don't think he's going to be far away from a Plutard. And I think that price, 10-1 that he is now, I actually did make that decision a few days ago and got a little bit bigger than that. But I think that 10-1 is well worth getting on side. Plutard, I think, wins it. Unbackable at the price. No point in backing him at the price, to be quite honest. And again, I agree with you. I think Galvin is a nice one to throw into the each way multiple. So I think we're pretty much on the same page with that race. Okay, King George. So feature race on Boxing Day. So just going to kick off with questions that came from Benji and Callum, who both talked about the poor record of King George horses in the Gold Cup. The horse that was mentioned specifically was Manella Indo, but obviously in the context of this race, I think it probably also applies to Chantry House. So the question is, is this the problem for either horse? Well, no, I don't think so. They're both horses. That one's second favourite, one's fourth favourite for the Gold Cup, and I think they're probably in their right place in the market. And I think they're possibly second and fourth favourite in this. I can't remember the exact prices for Chantry House now, but maybe second and fifth favourite. But similar places in the market, and I'd be much less interested in them for this than I would be for the Gold Cup, if I'm really honest. They've got to have a race somewhere. The Gold Cup is it. And the point that you made about the Cup final for Kenboy, well, this isn't a Cup final for these two, the same as a Plutar and Galvin, the big races in March. So you can't discount a Gold Cup winner being a King George winner. It has happened. And in times gone by, it's actually been a reasonable trial for the race. But, it tends to be, the sharper stayers that win King George's, the ones that don't really see out the Gold Cup trip properly at championship pace. And the only time you really see a King George winner winning the Gold Cup tends to be in one of those sort of weaker Gold Cup years where there isn't that real classy stayer in the field. So, I think it's a bit of a red herring personally. There is definitely a horses for courses thing. Has been seen by, the list of winners over, the last couple of decades. They tend to be those sharper 3-milers, should we say. Getting to the race itself, you could easily make a case for half a dozen of these. And you couldn't completely discount anything, if I'm really honest. But we've got to. So I think I'm just going to kick off by saying, just time-wise, I'm not going to be suggesting Dashel Drasher or Lost in Translation, as good a horse as they are. But I don't see either of those winning this race. I'm also going to discount the sort of second and third string type horses, or most of them. So certainly the Muns and Henderson second string horses, Tornado Fire and Mr. Fisher, again, really good horses. I can see them running well for a long way. One I can see running well for a long way and perhaps running out of steam, and the other one perhaps staying on, but not necessarily going the gallop. And I'm also going to discount St Calvados. I might have been interested in him if he'd have had a prep, and it had been a decent prep, by the way. But I can't be interested in him without a run, irrespective of the fact that he's gone to Nichols, who owns the race. So I'm happy to take him out. Really, from that preamble, I'm also going to discount the joint favourite or second favourite, Milarindo. I just don't see him having a hard race in a race that's going to suit quicker horses. I can see him running on, but something with more pace is probably going to win the race, and he's not going to get there. I can see him running into the places, though. I just can't see him winning. I think the other thing I'd say about him is his profile is that he's much better at going left-handed. 6 wins, 2 places, opposed to only 1 win and 5 places right-handed. It is degrees of subtlety there more than he doesn't go right-handed. But I do look at his profile and say overall he is better left-handed than right-handed. Chantry House is interesting, but I'm going to discount him for the same reasons as I said. I don't think he's going to have the gun to his head. I don't think he's going to have an overly hard race. We know that Henderson's not keen on that anyway these days. I think for both, it's more of a mid-season stepping stone. It's not their cup finals, as we said. What I will be interested in the race is comparing them to each other, because we're going to get our first clues, I guess, to see how Chantry House compares to Milarindo. So whilst I'm not expecting either of them to win the race, I'm going to be really interested in terms of how they run in the race and how they shape up to each other, and what you might think would happen off a similar gallop over a stiffer course and 2 miles further. So after all that, I'm left with 3. The 2 previous winners from Nichols, Clandesobo and Frodon, and Asterion Phalange. And all 3 of those, I think, come with some risks. And because they come with risks is why I say I won't completely discount the others that I have discounted. These are the 3 horses I think, if they run their best races, are the horses more likely to win it. But, I also see things in their overall profiles that suggest they don't always run their best races. So the first one, I think Clandesobo, he'd have to emulate Cato Star. Cato Star was beaten in that rescheduled 2010 renewal, and then came back and won it the following year. I think he's the only horse to have done that. I haven't been back for 50 years to look, but certainly in my living memory, he's the only horse to have done that. He's for me though probably the easier of the 3 to let go. This is a much tougher race. It looks a much tougher and deeper race than his previous 2 wins. And the thing that probably bothers me most of all is the lack of a prep. It's also a really long time since a horse won this with no prep. There's certainly not been one this century, and I went back as far as 1990 and I stopped looking. So, in more than 30 years, there hasn't been a horse that's won this off no prep.
It's really confused me, actually, Nichols, because it's completely against the whole profile of Clandesobo. His whole career, he's needed this prep run. You just go back a couple of seasons where it was a down royal. He came 2nd or 3rd, and that was a perfect pipe opener for when he won this. Yeah, I completely agree. I think, obviously, he took in the Betfair Chase last year, didn't he? Had a hard race in 2nd.
And Nichols blamed his defeat for that race. I can't have that, because he'd been to Haydock. He was beaten by Bristol de Mai in that race, but he was beaten by Bristol de Mai in that same race 2 seasons ago when he won his first King George. So I think there's an element of Paul Nichols second guessing himself and perhaps even fooling himself.
Yeah, 100%.
Look, you've got to respect him on what he's done around there previously, and I can't back him. I can't say if he won it, it would be a complete shock. Clearly, it wouldn't be a complete shock. He's a dual winner, and he's potentially got it in his locker if he's back to his best. But he's not going to be getting any better now, and I think this is a tougher race than the race he won 2 years ago. Frodon's bidding to do what all of sort of Nichol's aforementioned horses have done. Cato Star, Silvaniaco, Conti, and Clandesobo, and that's by coming back and winning it again. But for him, it's like Clandesobo. This is a cup final. This is a main target of the season, as it is for Clandesobo. So you know that they are going to be, absolutely up and fighting fit for this race. And his run last year was good, but a 2-length beating of Waiting Patiently is not in the same league as the field that we've got this time. This is going to be much harder. And people will point to Dan Royal and say, he beat Manila Indo and Galvin, he's improved, but he was hard fit against those horses. I backed him that day against Manila Indo and Galvin, and told everybody I knew to back him because he was the one that was out to win the race, and the others were having a blowout. And to get
that was his. So that, like we've said, it's kind of a theme, isn't it? That was his Gold Cup. I think
Absolutely.
For Nichols, that Frodon, that was his Gold Cup. Clandesobo, the King George, is his Gold Cup.
Yeah.
Obviously, they'd love to Frodon to back that up, but yeah, I think he had Frodon as good as he could ever have him that last day.
Yeah, exactly that. Look, he is a really good horse, and you can't argue that. The King George around Kempton suits his running style. But what I will argue is that his 32nd and 33rd chases were his best races. I'm not having it. I can't have that at all. They're the only two races he's gone through the 170 Racing Post rating mark. There is two most recent races, and I can find so many reasons for them not to be those kind of numbers. I can't have that Dan Royal race as being a 170 performance because the others were nowhere near their best. And that King George, he beat Waiting Patiently 2 lengths. Waiting Patiently isn't knocking on the door of 170 Racing Post ratings. It was a poor race last year. It didn't stand up. And the reality is for me that, he's got more on his plate this time. Yes, he's fit. Yes, it's a cup final for him. But I don't think he's going to be as far ahead as he was able to be at Down Royal. So, I don't think he's the one. I think he will run a big race. I think he will be there at the business end, but something's going to run him down. And also, on that note, I think it's worth remembering that Willie Mullins has won this too, and he's going to be hoping that Asterion for Launch can go and do what Florida Pearl did 20 years ago. Willie Mullins chaser in the King George these days is a rare old sight, and he's not wasting darts when he sends a horse to this race. Asterion for Launch himself hit 169 the last couple of times, and he's definitely an improving horse. He's lightly raced, he's unexposed, and he's coming to this race from a pretty high base. He's only had one race out of Novice Company. His last race in Novice Company was 169. His first race out of Novice Company was 169, and they were over 2 miles 5. And I reckon he shapes as though he'll improve again for a sharp 3 miles. I think this race will absolutely suit him. He travels really well in his races. This race is going to suit him because he's going to get a lead off Frodon. So Frodon's going to take him a good gallop, which I think suits Asterion for Launch. I think this race is going to be just set up perfectly for him. He's clearly talented. He obviously comes with a health warning, with his jumping. He's got a big mistake in him. We know this. And that's got to be a concern. And it just tempers your enthusiasm a little bit. But they're not going to be hanging around. And, the Nichols horses are going to be trying to put his jumping under pressure, and they're going to try and make sure he doesn't get an easy passage. But I think on balance for me, if he jumps around, I think he's the one that will win. As I say, right-handed looks perfect for him. 4 wins in one place when he stood up right-handed. So that's clearly his thing. And connections, I think, we just touched on, targets and the like. I think connections targets for Asterion for Launch are this and probably Punchestown. I think they may take in Cheltenham along the way. And anything that happens at Cheltenham just ends up being a bit of a bonus. But I think he's got 2 targets for this season. He's got the King George and he's got Punchestown. He's freely available at 11-2 with a touch of 6s. So again, he's backable each way for those that are so minded. You're going to get 3 places in the race. So he'd be my recommended bet in the race. Quite interesting. Might be interesting just to throw him in a little each way double with your suggestion, Galvin. I quite like the idea of that bet. I've kind of half answered a question that was asked by Made in Japan about his festival chances. Look, in terms of the festival, I'd be a bit less keen. I think I'd probably prefer him stepping back at the festival to the Ryanair on the new course. He's available at 16-1 in that race with cash out. So I think if I was going to suggest having a bet at Cheltenham, that would be the way I'd go, and perhaps not the Gold Cup. I think you'd still get a price on the day on the Gold Cup, to be honest. So, you can sit and wait if that's the case. I think if he wins on Boxing Day, clearly he's going to take a haircut, but I think he'll, again, perhaps take more of a haircut for the Ryanair. I think I couldn't see him placing in the Gold Cup. Certainly can't see him winning. Can't see him placing in the Gold Cup. I can see him placing in the Ryanair. Behind Allaho, the Ryanair is shaping like a pretty poor renewal, if I'm honest. It's really hard to make any cases for anything to put it up to Allaho. He'd probably have the best chance. Different ownership to Allaho. So you'd think they wouldn't be too concerned about going and taking him on. We might have a different idea, but certainly the Donnellys would certainly not be upset at taking on Allaho, I don't think. But, I think the Gold Cup, there's probably too many guns and too many thoroughstayers for him, because that, I don't think, is yet his bag. It might become it, but it's not at the moment. There's a few more races for us to cover, and I think we're probably just going to touch on these briefly, Jono. I'll do a couple of the UK ones, the Desert Walker Chase and the Wayward Lad, and you've got a few of the Irish ones to do. So I think the Desert Walker Chase is fairly simple to do. It's all about whether Shishkin turns up or not. I think he will, if I'm honest. I think all the noises that have come out of Henson's yard are, we need to make sure he's spot on, and we weren't quite happy with him. Oh, he's done a gallop and he's okay. Now, and he's even better now we've seen the entries. So I think the entries aren't going to scare him off. And I think we'll see Shishkin turn up, and I think we'll just see a bit of a parade. If I'm honest, he's going to have Gronutine in the race as well, so there's some kind of test in there. But he's just a much better horse. And the other one is the Wayward Lad Novices Chase. That should just be a bit of a parade for Edwardstone. The others won't even be in the same parish. So they're the other two sort of intriguing or usually intriguing chases around the Christmas period, the graded chases around the Christmas period in the UK. Not too much to add for them. You've got the Rewards Club chase, though. That is interesting for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Mullins obviously pre-recorded. Has come out over the last couple of days saying he would split the pair, Energumene and Chacun Boswell, with one of them probably going Desert Orchid, which hasn't happened. Now we've seen the entries. I can't really see him not running either, though, unless he's not obviously clearly happy. Maybe Chacun Boswell still not happy with him, but it's a big old way. The opportunities there in Ireland are very slim for the 2 mile open chasers. Yeah. You're basically saying if you don't run now, you're waiting for the Dublin Racing Festival. Or, one of them came over to the UK for the Clarence House, but that's the end of January, which takes away your Dublin Racing Festival kind of run. So you're making the call that you're only going to have 2 runs prior to Cheltenham, which maybe isn't a bad thing. But I would say, yeah, if they're both fitting well, I think they both go. Chacun Boswell is a tough one. back in Ireland at his best. 3-1 is too big. I would just have a bit of a question mark with him, really. And I think I certainly wouldn't be assuming they both. I think they will, but I wouldn't. I would want to see the declarations. And I think once Shaq and Boswell is declared, that 3-1 will be long gone. And I wouldn't risk backing it now, to be honest. So there's too many question marks to be overly confident.
For what it's worth, I think the fact that Shacken hasn't been entered at Kempton, the feeling I get from that is that we might not see him at Christmas at all.
Yeah,
I think Willie's already said that he's going to keep them in the park before the festival, so I can't see him changing his mind there. And I agree that there are limited opportunities for 2 mile graded novice chasers. Graded chasers, not novice chasers. But there are enough opportunities to, you've got Dublin Racing Festival, you've got Newbury, you've got Clarence House. What else have we got? Something else as well. I can't remember which. So there's enough to sort of taking over.
Yeah, I forget about Newbury actually.
And
often went, yeah.
I still feel there might be a bit of devil in Woolley trying to, unsettle Nicky Henson's plans for Shishkin as well. There's just that feeling I have that he's just going to drop him into the race that Nicky ideally wants, his prepping. And you can't blame him. He's got 2 genuine Grade 1 champion chase potential winners. So why would you not do that? You kind of would. And I think if Nicky Henson doesn't win at Christmas, I think he's mad. I think he's genuinely mad because Willie's going to target him somewhere else, and then it's going to get even harder. So, and he when he targets him, Shishkin needs that run in his legs. I still think Shishkin's the better of the 3.
Yeah,
but he becomes vulnerable against someone that's already match fit. And he can't send him to the festival undercooked either. So he needs to get a couple of races in before the festival. He needs jumping practice, at championship pace, or certainly at close to championship pace. So, but I think Shacken not showing up at Kempton. My read from that is we're probably not going to see him at Christmas. He's going to get a little bit of extra time, and he's the one we're probably going to see in January. And Ergemin, I think, will probably turn up. I could have completely misread this, of course. I think an Ergemin will be the one that turns up. What intrigues me most of all, though, is the other entry in that race. Really does intrigue me. Because Envoy LN turning up in that will have everybody watching.
Yeah.
But what's your thoughts?
Out of all the horses, if he could bounce back over Christmas, unbelievable. But I don't see dropping back to 2 miles as being what clicks everything back together. I think we touched on it previously. There's something going on, and I don't think a drop in trip is going to be, that's Envoy Allen back again. I think his jumping just doesn't seem quite right.
Mm.
I think I can't see him beating Energamine. It's a bit of a part of me just thinks it's a little bit of a sorry sight, really, where they're kind of just throwing out a change in the hope that something's going to click by dropping him in trip now. And I don't see it as much as I'd love to see him kind of live up to the hype that we all wanted. I think he gets fairly brushed aside in this, in all honesty. And I don't really know what you do then. You probably just go back for the Ryanair as a kind of making up the numbers, maybe.
Yeah.
Or they even do they kind of pull up stumps and try and get to the bottom of him. But yeah, I don't know.
There's either something mental or physical going on. They do need to try something. If they can't find something wrong, then I guess it's legitimate to try and do something different here. I don't know. Look, stepping back to 2 mile in this kind of company doesn't feel like it. I think I said on a previous podcast, I think I'd probably be more tempted to put him back over hurdles and see what happens. His pain may have been associated with jumping fences. The damage may have been done jumping fences. That fall is either mental or he had that fall at the festival and it was a heavy fall. So that leaves something between his ears. Then he had that chase at the end of the season where he had that chipped bone and he's jumping fences in pain. If he's over those two things and there genuinely isn't something underlying, it's between his ears.
Yeah.
And if it's between his ears, do something different. It's not the trip, it's the fences. Send him over hurdles, do something different. And I really would have liked to have seen them do that to find out. And they may well still do that, who knows? But you imagine, he's had the full scans, the works, he's had, better treatment than we get if we went private. So, it's shown nothing.
I mean, like you say, you've got to try something, but I think there's a danger that you could actually you could do more harm than good actually by putting him in this kind of 2 mile race. Could you get him back over fences after this? Maybe, who knows? But
absolutely. And look, you might be right. It might be the thing is you just give him the rest of the season off. You give him a lot longer, and hopefully it's whatever the problem is sorts itself out. But yeah, look, it'll add some intrigue to the race. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Now you've got a few more races over in Ireland. I think you wanted to touch on. So I'll let you talk about the races and the horses.
Yeah, I'll just rattle through a couple of others. So you've got the Faheen Novices chase at Limerick on the 26th.
Yep.
Quite a tough one to gauge of the entries. Obviously, Bob Ollinger was a potential runner. He's been kind of confirmed and non-runner now. I think Farouk Delane, currently 3. He's not actually an odds checker, so I kind of almost forgot that he was running. But he's 3-1. Now I think if you kind of got the usual Limerick heavy that is often at this time of year, I would probably be all over him. He won at the meeting last year. Won the famous kind of Albert Bartlett trial, beating Vanillier. I'm not overly keen on the kind of Drinmore horses, the kind of middle distance Irish runners that we've had. I don't know if you know actually, I'm sure I read or I saw somewhere Beacon Edge that he's bled before, but I can't find any record of it. So maybe
last time I believe. So yeah, that's definitely true.
So that's a worry. And I don't know if he goes for the 3 mile race as well.
I'll tell you what it was. I think I think Ruby commented after the race that he saw blood in his nostrils.
That was it, yeah. I think you've got the likes of Fury Road, who you couldn't be backing him after his last run, where I think he had the race at his mercy really, and somehow didn't win. Gabby Nacco, I think he'll probably run. I think that horse on the forum just mentioned him as well. I think he'll probably run in that race. That's kind of his trip. Kind of be in and out with his jumping. 1 minute he looks a brilliant jumper. Next minute he's making mistakes.
I think they should be looking to handicap him. If I'm honest, I think if they can get him handicapped right, I think he'd be a really good horse for the plate. Yeah,
definitely. I did actually see a shout for him dropping back over hurdles. I can't remember where for like a Coral Cup bid, which I thought was quite interesting.
I think he's probably going to be sure of.
But yeah, for Delane, 3-1. Gordon Elliott said he's in savage form today. I think it's his target. Yeah, I would love to see kind of a whole load of rain coming at Limerick, and then I'd be very, very strong on him at 3-1. He's the kind of standout in that race, I think. Definitely wants further, but I think the conditions of the race, he's got history at the track and this time of year. Made a perfectly good chase debut recently, and I think
he's one that could really shake up some festival markets as well, because I think if he runs a big race and they can satisfy themselves that he's okay going left-handed, I think we're going to see him end up in the National Hunt Chase. And I know everybody's going to hate me for saying this, everybody that listens to this podcast, but I think that then becomes a really strong possibility that Run Wild Fred runs in the Brown Advisory.
Not allowed to say that. Yeah. Well, yeah, you had O'Leary came out recently, didn't he? Which was completely kind of on course for his view. We know he doesn't like the National Hunt Chase, but yeah, actually, just quickly going on to that then. So the 3 mile Neville's Hotel Chase, kind of a crossover with some of the runners here. And you mentioned Run Wild Fred. He looks set to line up, and actually you've got on the ropes. Not sure if he's going to run, but he's entered up, fairly short price as well. So I think there'll be a lot of people, myself included, not wanting either of them to win the race.
Absolutely.
Because
you want the third will do fine, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, you do not want to see them win this race.
No.
Back to kind of the theme that's running through this podcast. I think Vanillier. I think this is the best chance he'll have of a Grade 1. He's currently 5-1. Obviously, come the Dublin Racing Festival, you're dropping back in trip in the flow gas. You've then got the Mullins kind of big hitters, the Galloping Deschamps. I still think Gaillard de Menil has a chance, but yeah, you've got Mullins and who knows Statler. You will have the UK, obviously at Cheltenham, in Ahoy Senior, Brave Man's Game. So I think this for Vanillier, Cromwell has to be looking at this, thinking I've got to have him spot on.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of horses we've just said like Run Wild Fred on the ropes. Realistically, I know connections might end up lining them up elsewhere, but they're not Grade 1 3 milers for me. They're wanting further. So for me, I think 5-1 is a fair bet, and I think he should be at his absolute peak. I think because he will never have a better chance of a Grade 1 over fences this season. A couple just
before you move off there. Look, yeah. I couldn't agree more. I really want to see Vanillier win that race for very selfish reasons, as you know, ones that you almost certainly share. I quite like to see Big Ned run a decent race because that potentially also suits a purpose. I'd like to see him be the Jigginstown Brown Advising Novice Chase horse because I don't want the other two to be. Yeah. I actually would like to see both of the other two running in the National Hunt Chase. And clearly, of the two, the one that I definitely want to see run there is Run Wild Fred. And look, almost certainly if he's beaten by, another Grade 1 novice over the trip in the Neville's Hotel, you'd be fairly confident that notion of running in the Brown Advisory will go away.
I think that's the key, isn't it? We need to see a Gigginstown horse step up and be the 3 mile Grade 1 horse, don't we?
Exactly.
Because they'll stick one in. And the fear is that Run Wild Fred, they'll see that rating of 159 and just go, yeah, he's the one. He's too good. Too good for the National Hunt Chase. Couple of other just brief ones. you've got obviously the big Paddy Power Chase. The Boss's Oscar is a big kind of red alert horse for maybe having the handbrake off. I can't really take a credit of this one. Just one that I know Charlie's mentioned him on the forum. Waves of the Sea came second to On the Ropes last time. He's only up £4 from last time, so he's running off 143, and he's only a 5. He's bundles of experience. He's been heavily raced in his career, but he's only 5 years old, and he's only had the 2 chase runs over 3 miles. So there's every reason to think, given his age, given how he's progressive, kind of profile over 3 mile chasing, I think he could well kind of keep that line of improvement from his second run last time out. My initial thought was maybe off 143. Would they?
Which race is this, John?
Paddy Power Chase.
The handicap chase.
Yeah. So I think he's 16 to 1.
Is he in that? Oh yes, apologies. Yes, he is, because I like a different horse in that race. That's why I was questioning it.
So it's plenty of JP horses. My first kind of thought was off 143. Are they going to try and hold him back now for the Kim Muir? But I just think the Pots in Ireland now are so big. There's too many massive. Obviously, you've got the Irish Grand National, which is the big one, but there's Dublin Racing Festival. There's so many big Pots in Ireland now. I think the Kim Muir is kind of obviously people target it still, but it's second. It's a second thought now, and I think when you're rated 143, you can try and be clever, but you're at the hands of the English handicapper who could just pop you up £3 anyway. So I think it's stupid in them trying to hold him back. So I think he would. Again, Charlie kind of flagged him, and I've kind of been keen to see how he goes ever since. But he would be an interesting one. I'm going
to pose him with a horse that I think has been has had a very similar career. They've almost been joined at the hip in terms of their campaigns. Different stable with Gavin Cromwell, but the same owner, JP. I really, really like Alpha Mix for that race. A lot.
Is he the current favourite?
He's gone favourite now, yeah. Boss's Oscar might be favourite. He's been backed in the last 24, 48 hours. He's into 8 to 1 now. So the money has come for him. He's rated 137, completely unexposed over fences. His racing post ratings improving really quickly. Shapes as though he wants 3 miles. He's not run over it yet. So I'm expecting to improve for it. He gets that for the first time on Monday. And it just looks to me as though they've been waiting for a big pot for him, and I think it's this race. I really do. I am really, really sweet on him. So we're going head to head on this one.
Definite eye catcher. Well, you got the JP forecast. There you go. Pay for Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. Although rarely are they both off on the same day.
Yes, that is the worry.
Having said that, there's been plenty of times where we've seen, a couple of horses filling the first 2 places in JP colours, and we've seen him fill the frame before. So, I'm perhaps being a bit harsh, and they'll be running on their merits. But I am very, very sweet on Alpha Mix. Very sweet on him. For me, is actually one of the best bets of the Christmas period.
Oh, there you go. Couple of just last ones to finish on. Not a fancy at all. I just thought it was vaguely interesting. I don't think anyone's going to be looking at the Hunter's Chase at Down Royal over Christmas. There's about 50 other races you'd prioritise and get more excited about.
I'm neither going to be able to agree or offer an alternative for this race.
Yeah. People will probably go, who cares? But I just thought it's slightly interesting. Bill Away, obviously the horse that keeps getting beat. Mullins keeps trying to win it for the owner. Stable Tools all said he would follow the same kind of campaign, so plenty of runs, plenty of jumping experience. He hasn't actually been out yet. This time last year, he'd already had 2 runs. And he doesn't get an entry in this race which I think he ran in it 2 years ago. So if you backed him, I'd just be slightly wary. Obviously, we spoke about appreciate it and kind of reading the signs of entries. He's not been entered up at all this year. Clearly, there's been a setback. I mean, the Hunter's Chase season doesn't kick in till later in the year, so it might be nothing. But I think if you have backed him, I don't even think there's a cash out firm that has him listed at the moment. But that was just something I just noticed.
Okay, that's a really good pickup. Actually, that was a good pickup.
And then I think it kind of touches on one thing Charlie said. Actually, we spoke about Manila Indo getting beat, but in not having kind of a negative effect on his chance for March. The entries could change completely here, but just looking at the Mayor's Novice Chase on the 28th at Limerick, you've got Concertista, who I think will run. Mullins, again from Stable Tours, said he would campaign her quite heavily. Similar to
she needs experience. She's going to run in the Open Mayor's Chase at the festival. She needs experience, so you'd think they wouldn't be waiting until after Christmas.
Exactly. So follow the cool Reevy route of plenty of experience and kind of basically prove that she can take her place in the Mayor's Novice Chase. I think there's an interesting runner there, actually, Manila Melody, quite closely tied in with Concertista. And I would be keen to oppose. Concertista has to be favourite. The odds aren't out yet, but she will be favourite, no doubt. I'd be interested if Manila Melody gets declared and just how much that price difference is. I'd be keen to oppose Concertista. The trip's over 2 mile 6, which I think is on the long side of Concertista, whereas Manila Melody, she's 3 mile point-to-point background.
Yeah.
I think I'd be really keen if I could see Manila Melody line up. I'd be really keen to back her, actually. Obviously, I don't know the prices.
Really I agree that 2 mile 6 potentially does stretch Concertista.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There'll be some value in that race, and Manila Melody will probably be the one.
So I actually think it's I'll be kind of hovering over as soon as those declarations, that first kind of price up. Usually hills are quite early. I could see them making a mistake, and I would go quite big actually on Manila Melody. She's a good price. And on the point of Charlie, I think I wouldn't then discount Concertista back at Cheltenham in the Mayor's Novice. She had a decent start over fences. I think if she continues that, I could see her running a good race, but getting beaten, maybe getting pushed out, and then actually kind of enhancing her claims. But I would definitely be siding with Manila Melody between the pair over Christmas. So fingers crossed.
That's 2 really good shouts. That's 2 really good shouts. I like both of those, and I think again there aren't many horses that I look at that might get turned over at Christmas that will get pushed out that I'd still be interested in. And I would be interested in that. I think that's a very good pickup. Okay, we've got to do some of these questions. Time's getting on. So, the one that everybody's tried to do, Lehman's said, "How will Willie split his Novice Chase?" So let's just take them by division. So, Arkle, I'm going to say Fernie Hollow and Blue Lord. I suspect that's probably the easiest one of them all. You in the same camp? Yep.
Yeah, I think easy now. Following the news.
I think Marsh, Galliard, Domaini, and I think he will probably have one of his handicap hurdlers from last season that's now a novice chaser as his second string in that. I can't think of anything else. Maybe Auton Couleur. That's another one name that's floating around. I'm not sure how much experience he's got ready for this. He lacks racing, but they'd be the ones on my mind there, perhaps.
Yeah, that the Turners that's the tricky one, isn't it? I think for slotting. Just one thing, Holton Couleur's, he's got that beginner's chase entry over 2 miles. Just if Fernie Hollow was to really bomb out in that Arkle trial, he'd be one I'd maybe hover over in the Arkle market. I think it's 33-1. Yeah, he would be a slight kind of consideration just if Fernie Hollow really bombed out. I think if he then takes up that beginner's chase entry, there's potentially still time for him to.
I might be mixing him up with the horse. Is he a 4-year-old, be 5-year-old in the festival?
Yeah, so not ideal. He did come third in the Triumph, I think. Ran really well.
That's right.
Kind of loomed up.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be overly keen. I think it'd be a season too early. If I'm honest, the record of 5-year-olds in the Arkle is terrible. There used to be quite a big allowance for them years ago, but since then, it's just been an absolute graveyard.
Yeah, I just think they might. If Fernie gets beat, I think there might be a sudden kind of flurry to try and rearrange things. But yeah, who knows?
Obviously, we've got Galloping Deschamps, and I think everybody is just assuming that he goes to the Brand Advisory Novice Chase. Statler is interesting because he was talked about as a National Hunt chase horse. People are now thinking he's either Brand Advisory or even a marsh horse. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he showed more speed than I thought. I thought he had, and I know Patrick Mullins has kind of compared him slightly to the Black Hercules mould, which wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, I think there's so much kind of stacking the novice chasers with Willie Mullins. It's hard to say, but yeah, it wouldn't shock me actually. Willie Mullins has generally sent a couple of different types to that kind of marsh chase. You had Vautour and York Hill. Obviously, they went on to be stayers, but at the time they were very speedy. Both would have ran in the Arkle.
Yeah.
If stablemates hadn't have been involved. But then, yeah, on the flip side, you had Black Hercules, who was the 4-mile favourite until he came over to England, didn't he?
Yeah,
I think that's when they changed back and suddenly dropped back in trip. So
yeah,
I think he could go anywhere. Actually, I think he showed a lot more versatility in his last run that opens a lot more doors.
Yeah, I think instinctively for me, I think he will end up in the marsh. That was my feeling watching the race. That was possibly the right race for him. But I still can't get over the feeling that I think he is not truly a Grade 1 horse. Albeit, he ran a really nice race the other day. He beat his own stablemate that looked undercooked and didn't jump particularly well. I'm still to be convinced by Statler. Look, it could well be that another summer at grass and a bit more fun out and a bit more grown-ups the making of him. But I want to see him put in a second performance like the last day before I could start getting committed with him.
Yeah.
So Brand Advisory, I think Galloping Deschamps. I think the other horse for the Brand Advisory will end up being 5 o'clock. By the way, he's got his entry over Christmas, and he's been back cantering away for a while. I understand, and he was one they were really excited about the season before last season. And the noises that came out of the place were that he was electric. He was as good as anything they got. And this, bear in mind, this is the time when Monkfish was all the rage for the race. So I think 5 o'clock's actually quite interesting. He's got to prove he retains all of his ability. My understanding was, there was never a risk of him coming back. It wasn't that kind of injury. And I actually think he's quite interested in getting in the festival book. He's available 66-1 or 50-1 with cash out. I think if you really want to back him, do it now, because there's not much risk at those kind of prices. You don't have to put much on to get a big return. And what's the chances that you're going to cash out at similar money anyway if you really need to? I think he's potentially a bet for the festival. I've actually had him tucked away for a little while, actually, probably earlier than I should have done. But I wouldn't put people off backing him for the festival.
Yeah, definitely like that. I think you're bang on the money with the kind of regard that he was held in. I remember Joe Chambers, obviously the racing manager, quite often over Twitter, you had people asking about Monkfish, and every time it was just, don't forget 5 o'clock, don't forget 5 o'clock. I think he was his horse. Yeah, he was his horse to follow for a couple of years straight, I think. And I think he, obviously, all the horses missed out on the Punchestown that was cancelled through COVID. But I think he would have been a very interesting runner. Obviously, ran a fair race in the Martin Pipe. Wasn't an unbelievable run, but more than fair. And I think he would have kicked on. Obviously, he hasn't run since. I think he would have kicked on at Punchestown, gone up in grade, and you probably would have seen him a much bigger reputation than what he has now. So yeah, I definitely agree. Now he's got that entry over Christmas. I think he had one recently as well, which he didn't take up.
Yeah.
All signs kind of point to him being fit and well, and I would definitely follow you in on that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad we're on the same page with him. I like him a lot, and I think for everybody out there, I would not be discouraging you backing him before the race over Christmas. But there's obviously a health warning there because he's had time out, and it comes with a risk. And some people don't like backing horses that have had a season out for the festival. All of those things. But he's 66 to 1. I think he's definitely worth a small amount of investment. National Chase, I'm guessing we're both thinking on the ropes goes there. What's your thought on Capodanno? Do you think he goes to the National Chase, or do you think he might be Brown Advisory?
I hope I do. I hope he does. I can't be overly confident, but to me, his last run, I came away from it thinking National Chase. JP likes a runner in it as well. You've obviously got the benefit of potentially having Derek O'Connor on board. Yeah. So you could have Patrick Mullins and Derek O'Connor as his two riders. And I think the stable tours are quite interesting, where Mullins kept, I think, in several different ones, he was mentioning how a lot of different jockeys would want to be riding him. Which I think was quite a subtle.
Won't be wanting to get dropped off, etc., etc. Couldn't agree more. And I think, I think you just hit the nail on the head. Patrick and Derek O'Connor know what they want to ride in that race, and they're probably expecting it.
Yeah.
Okay, we've touched on Vanillier and Gabinarco. That horse brought both of those up and asked our opinion, but we've done that already. Eggs asked about Capodanno. Actually, anybody tempted by the 200 to 1 Sky request a bet to win any race in March and the following Gold Cup? Me, no, is the answer. I thought he was really good the last day. He's definitely a contender. When Kev put him up as the mystery horse early last season, I guess it's kind of written in the stars that he's going to go and win the longest chase at the festival rather than a 2-mile hurdle. Which will just amuse me. I'm not particularly keen on the request to bet, if I'm really honest. He wouldn't be my number one in either of the two races, I don't think. And if he's not number one in either of those two races, he's unlikely to be the winner of the Gold Cup either, I don't think. I think he's a really good horse. I think he'll run a big race in whichever race he turns up in March, but I don't see him as the winner. As a consequence, I don't think I'd then see him as the winner in the Gold Cup next year either. Don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'd agree. And actually, I think obviously the any race part of the bet is the bit that kind of appeals with these requester bets, but I'm pretty sure, I haven't got the odds to hand, but I'm pretty sure you could back him for the National Chase and say the Brown Advisory now. Whatever odds, if he wins it, he'd be in the Gold Cup. You'll get more than 200 to 1. Heads to bet, but you'd probably get about 350 to 1. Yeah. I don't see any appeal in that 200 to 1. Even if you, with all the question marks about fancying it by then, just do the 2 manual bets would be
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
advice.
I'd agree. Okay, so on to Charlie's question about chases that might lose over Christmas and might be pushed out and become value. You've just unearthed a real gem, actually. I think that's a really good shout. We've obviously discussed a couple of the races that quickly spring to mind. That's Fernie and Riviere de Tel and Hoisinor and Braveman's Game. I'm not sure the losers would necessarily be big drifters in those races if they were close. I think if they weren't close, then you probably wouldn't be backing them at longer odds anyway. So I'm not sure they particularly fit the bill. Charlie used the example of Manila Indo. I think people are wise to him now. You know, he might get pushed out half a point or so, but I can't imagine there being a real overreaction. The other one that occurred to me was perhaps Galvin, if he was turned over properly in the Savills. But, if he was turned over properly in the Savills, I don't think he'd be particularly interested in a bigger price for the Gold Cup anyway. The only thing I think that could potentially happen there, which actually is interesting, I haven't thought about it, if he was properly turned out over the Savills, would he go to the cross country?
I did think if he was well beat, would they change direction?
That's interesting.
Definitely.
I hadn't thought about that. I need to have a think about that one myself, actually. I don't know what I think about it at the moment. It would be the obvious thing to do, wouldn't it? Gets beaten in the Savills, goes to the cross country, goes to the national.
Yeah. Would it depend on? I know you're looking at different handicappers, but would it depend on what his mark went down to? Maybe.
Possibly. It wouldn't for the cross country, of course. It doesn't really matter for cross country, but I think his mark probably is quite important for the Grand National, because it'll either be the Grand National or Punchestown, I would imagine. So if his mark did go down to something they thought was feasible for the National, I think they'd definitely consider going cross country route then. If it didn't go down, then I think it's a slightly different decision making process and a more difficult call. Actually, I'm not sure what I'd think if he was my horse in those circumstances. If I thought he was going to get stuffed in the Gold Cup, I think I'd probably go the cross country, actually, because he would have a really good chance.
What I think would be interesting.
If it was a one-off and it would be better for Cheltenham, that's going to run to a place I probably would value the place in the Gold Cup more than a cross-country win. Difficult one.
Yeah. What I think would be interesting is I don't think you would hear anything. I think Elliot would bring him over on trials day, and I think that's probably the first you would hear about them switching to cross country. So that would be kind of have your ears to the ground, and if you heard he came over for some schooling, that's when you
definitely
that's when you go in.
I don't know how I feel about the fact he's not running one of the cross country races in October and November, though. I'm not sure how I'd feel about it. Don't know. I need to give that some thought, I think. Okay, next one was Rooster Booster was asking about Jungle Boogie and 5 o'clock. Well, we covered 5 o'clock anyway, and I think we're both of a similar view that he's worth getting on side at those kind of prices. What about Jungle Boogie? Have you put any thought to him?
Not a massive thought. I know he's so inexperienced. They spoke a little bit about maybe the Ballymore or Albert Bartlett last year, but it was just too soon for him.
Yeah.
The owner does like a Cheltenham runner, but I'd be surprised if he's a festival horse, because seeing as we haven't seen him, he's so inexperienced and we haven't seen him yet. I don't think he's got any Christmas entries.
Yeah, he has actually. I think he's got entries at 2 and 2.5, but I think that's still a problem, John. He's had 2 bumpers. They're sending him straight over fences. What's he going to have? He's going to have 4 lifetime runs by the time he gets to the festival at best. He's clearly a fragile horse. They're not going to rush him along anyway. Could I see him turned up in one? Maybe he's the one that gets slipped into the Marshall, the Turners, or whatever it's called now. But I can't see him as a contender because he's just so inexperienced. That said, he's probably had lots and lots of scoring at home, and it comes back to the thing that we say about Willie. If there's going to be a trends buster, it's going to be a Willie Mullins horse. But I couldn't be backing him, I don't think. I suspect he's probably smart. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But he's probably one for next year, not this year, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, you are right. He's got the 2 entries. Yeah.
That horse asked about Appreciate It and Galloping having no run yet, and any concerns. Well, clearly, all the concerns have been well voiced by everybody with Appreciate It, and clearly he's not going to his intended targets at the very least. I'm certainly not concerned about when Galloping starts out. We know that all Mullins horses have been held up because of the ground, and we know he's coming out over Christmas. So I think that's probably moved on from when we asked people to raise the questions last week. So I think, unless you feel any differently, Jono, I think we can probably just move on with that one.
Yeah, but just actually, I've got one more horse actually that's running over Christmas. That would be my kind of last point actually. Just away from Ireland in the Welsh National. Obviously, Native River is the key horse here, because if he runs, he's just going to be giving so many horses so much weight. I think Secret Reprieve will be getting 2 stone from him.
Yeah, Secret Reprieve will get off 10 stone.
Which is unbelievable.
And I think the intention is, I think they've come out and said the intention is to run.
As in run Native River?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So the horse that I actually thought he'd be a bit bigger. Just one that took my eye was Ramses Dete, David Pipe. He's 20-1 in a place still. There's 4 places. General 16-1. He was 25-1 a week or 2 ago. Whether that's money is kind of signalling he's going to run or not, I don't know. So he runs off 146, which is his lowest chase mark since he was second in the same race 3 years ago, where he came second to Elegant Escape off 144. Now, his thing with him, he's not a 150 horse. He's kept kind of going up into the 150s and then just being well held. Since that second in the Welsh National, he ran second in the Haydock Grand National Trial of 149. Then had a few races in the 150s, couldn't quite compete, dropped back down to 149 last November, where he beat Yala Enki at Cheltenham. Again, went up in the 150s, struggled again, slowly been dropping down. And actually, his last race, I think, was a more than good enough run. He came 4th off 147, so he's actually been dropped a pound. Now he's behind 2 very progressive horses. One of them was Strictly a Dancer, who's obviously racked up a string of ones this season. And he was giving him the best part of 2 stone that day. So basically an almost impossible task. But yeah, he came 4th, was running a fine race for a long way, just kind of lost a couple of places right at the end. This is his type of race. He loves the national races, big field handicaps, whatever the ground, it won't be a hindrance. You probably want a bit more rain, which I think they're going to get.
There's quite a bit of rain around for the weekends and running all over the Christmas period. So, and we know that Jepso can get quite soft quite quickly.
Exactly, yeah. The Welsh National can really turn into a slog. And he is a horse for a slog. And the absolute key, he can't run his race in the 150s, but when he's back down in the 146, like I said, he came second off 144. He's run some big races off 149, winning just last November off that mark. I think he's only a 9-year-old. He was one that kind of stood out for me actually in the race. Yeah,
that's interesting. But all my inclination is to take on the favourite in that race as well. Secret Reprieve's the obvious one. He's he's clearly well handicapped, and he needs to get a win to get into the national. He didn't get in last year off this mark, so and I think they were pretty gutted because I think they really fancied the chances in the national itself. But he'll look like a good thing on the day. He might end up being a good thing, but you take him on for a number of reasons, really. The first thing is I also did the same sort of trawl of this race as I did the King George, and I couldn't find a first-time out winner for 30 years. Again, I went back to 1990 and stopped. So I can't find anything that's won this race off seasonal debut. Something would have done way back when, I'm sure, but not in living memory, really. So that would put me off. There has been talk that he's not had the smoothest of preps anyway. So that dampens my enthusiasm. So those two things combined, the fact that he's making his seasonal debut here isn't a plan, which is a bit worse than Clandesobo, because at least Nichols has made it. He made it as a plan. So again, I'm looking for bigger alternatives. Ramses is interesting. I looked at him. I wanted to see the ground. He's more of an on-the-day bet for me. So he was on my shortlist. I had 4 or 5 on my shortlist. There were 2 that I have backed or put a stake in the ground now. We'll go back later when they're offering 6 and 7 places for the race. But the 2 that I've backed to a small stake for now was Hill 16. I backed at 20 to 1. And these are both still available at this price, by the way, these prices. I like him a lot. Concerned that he will be slightly out of the handicap, but horses have won this race from out of the handicap before. I think it's a race that will suit. I think he is a very progressive horse, and I actually like him quite a lot. The other one that is interesting for me is a horse that I actually backed in the Hennessy at a massive price, and he made a really bad mistake part way through. Recovered slowly from that, and he was one of the horses running on. He finished in, I think, I'd have to go back and check my facts here, but I think he finished 8th running on. That's Fortescue. He's 50 to 1 for this. Now, for the Hennessy, all the time, I quite liked the fact he had a big price, and I backed him with the extra places, and I was pretty gutted when he finished 8th, just out of them. But all the way through, I've been hoping for some rain because the best of his profile is on soft ground. So I think he becomes even more interesting if the rain comes, just as Ramses Dete is. But I think he might not be unnoticed, actually, which is why I chose to take a little bit of the 50s that's available now. And I'll take, the best price I can get at 6 or 7 places, or 6 and 7 places possibly, when the race comes. But I think he's a massive price. So those 2 interest me for the Welsh National. There's a couple of other races that interest me. One in particular is the Roland Merrick at Wetherby. I don't know whether if you had a chance to look at that. You may not have looked at that race, John.
I'll be honest, Wetherby hasn't even been on my radar.
No, well, Silver Hallmark's got the entry there, and he's also got an entry at Chepstow. And I'm thinking, although different trainers, one's obviously with Evan Williams and Secret Reprieve with Evan Williams, and Silver Hallmark is with Fergal O'Brien. They're the same owners, the Ruckers. And I'd imagine the Ruckers, if the horse has an entry in both races, I would imagine the Ruckers would have a preference for him to be racing on the same day down at Chepstow for similar prize money. So I'm not convinced that Silver Hallmark's going to turn up in the Roland Merrick. He's interesting if he does. He's interesting for both races, but the horse that I'm really interested in for the Roland Merrick is a horse called Top Benville. I don't know whether you remember, he ran in the RSA, was it 2 seasons ago? I can't remember when it was, maybe a couple of seasons ago. It might have even been 3 seasons ago now, but he won this race two years ago. But he won it off a £4 higher mark. So he has the feel of a horse that they're trying to get back down to a winnable mark, and he slots back into this race, and I think he's really interesting. He's 14-1. I backed him at 16s a couple of days ago, so there's been a little bit of money for him. So whether that's significant or not, I don't know. But I quite like Top Benville for the Royal American at a big price. The one that I think will probably be the biggest danger to him is Good Boy Bobby, who I think is a decent horse, and these kind of races suit him. But I think Top Benville is a massive price at 14s. Anything else that you've got on your radar?
No, I think that's it from me, actually.
Okay, well, I'm just going to do one more. I know we're supposed to be discussing the chases here, but I think given the timing of the Potemps qualifier at Leopardstown, I don't think we should not give that a mention or at least a nod, because when we do the next one of these, that race will have run. There's some interesting entries there. First port of call is always the Elliott horses. Ard Hill's entered up there, the one that romped in and looks like it's probably the best handicapped hurdler in chasing. And I'm sure that Gordon Elliott would quite like to get it qualified for the Potemps, but it's off a really low mark. It's 15th reserve, and he's probably going to have to go and win 3 hurdle races well somewhere to even have a mark to get in the Potemps. So I'm not sure he's necessarily the one, and I don't think he's actually going to get a run. But I did notice people are trying to back him for the Potemps, which I thought was a bit premature. He's got 2 more in there that I think are potentially interesting. Dumb Boy, which looks progressive, and I'll just put him in the interesting bracket for now, rather than one that I'm really looking to back. But the one that does interest me of his, it's one that I've mentioned on the forum quite early on, and I think we've talked about him on one of these before, and that's Dufflecoat. I think 3 miles, there's been some messing around since he had that bit of time off. I think Dufflecoat is very interesting. So I will be really looking for him to be running on into 4th, 5th or 6th. Some others that I think are of interest, Silver Sheen of Jessie Harrington. She's not averse to having won for this race. Silver Sheen, I think, has been intended for this race the last couple of seasons, actually. He won that qualifier at Warwick 2 seasons ago when Cider Burley qualified. I don't know whether you remember that, because Cider Burley messed up first time around and went to Warwick and qualified. Silver Sheen, I think, did he win that race or was second in that race? I think he might have been second, actually. I probably should have checked my facts before I came on here. But I know they were pretty keen on Silver Sheen for the Potemps that season. He's going to end up, if he qualifies here, on a similar mark to then, and I think it still remains the plan. So he's interesting. Gentleman's Game for Mouse Morris is in there, off 145 or 147, something like that. Certainly in the 140s. Might even be 143. So he has to be of interest because he's potentially a graded horse in a handicap qualifying in the Potemps. So he's definitely worth watching. 2A Permis, definitely also worth watching. He was third to Cider Belay in the Potemps final 2 years ago, off £2 higher than he is now. Been chasing in between as he was then. So you'd think this is definitely a plan. So he's definitely to be watched. And I think the other one you have to watch is one that, I think one or two of us potentially got a little bit excited about for the Greatwood Hurdle, but didn't get a run in the end, and that's Winter Fog, Emmett Mullins. So he's going to have to go and win somewhere. It probably wouldn't matter if he actually won the race in actual fact. So I'll be keeping a really close eye on him. But I think the tip for the race is back whatever Willie Mullins' best horse is, because he's probably going to be the only horse that's trying. So there we go.
Yeah. What do you make of, just very quickly, Burning Victory? Obviously, had that 3 mile handicap hurdle recently, kind of bombed out. Do you think she's a potential Potemps horse?
No, I suspect I probably wouldn't even back her. I don't think Willie could plot a horse for the Potemps if he tried. I think he can go and win a Potemps qualifier somewhere with something, because he will run them as a legitimate race. And I just don't think particularly interesting. Doesn't mean he won't have a runner in the race, but how many winners has he had of the race? The story tells its own story. Really. It tells its own story, really, doesn't it? He's had some very well fancied horses for the race. Some relatively short prices, but they all tend to bomb because horses that are ridiculously well handicapped are always going to beat them. And I think it's as simple as that. And I think the other thing I would say about Burning Victory is she did qualify and went to the final. You want a horse that jumps hurdles well around there. And no, I couldn't have her, I don't think. Couldn't have her. So, in terms of recommended bets, then, John, in fact, let's just, before we get onto that, I think the poll, I think we should do who wins the King George and who wins the Savile Chase. So maybe 2 polls this week. Let's just get the entries up on there and let's see whether people agree or disagree with our views of those races and why. I think they've made quite good polls this week. So, look at recommended bets this week. What have you got?
Trying to run through. So, I think Galvin is a 5-1 each way, and Kenboy 10-1 each way. Both in the Saviles, getting the 3 places early. But got to get them in before declarations. I would do that. I think Farouk Delane 3-1 in the Fahim Novices. And I would, quite like Wave of the Sea, the Paddy Power Chase. Again, thanks for Charlie for kind of first getting him on my mind. Vanillier, a 5-1 for the Neville's Hotel 3-mile chase. And probably my biggest bet would be if Manila Melody rocks up against Concertista in that Mare's Novice Chase, and she's a decent price against the Fav. I would definitely be going in on that one.
Yeah, I like some of those bets, and there'll also be some that I'll be chucking into some multiples, I suspect. For me, Asterion for Longe and the King George, I think 6-1. I'm on him anti-post, so I'm not going back in at 6-1. But if I wasn't, I probably would back him at 6-1. Top Benville, I've mentioned for the Roland Merrick at 14-1. A couple of each way shouts in the Welsh National Hill 16 at 20-1 and Fortescue at 50s. And I do quite like your selection, Ramses de Taille as well, if the ground's soft. And I think he's around the 14-1 mark from memory. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but I think he was around 14-1. So Hill 16, 20, 50s.
20s in a place, 16s general from Ramses to Taille.
I was only half tongue-in-cheek when I said William Munt won his best chance in the per temps qualifier. I actually was quite serious. I haven't seen the final decks yet, but that's probably what I'll be looking at. And the one that I'm strongest on, and it's the one that we are actually opposing each other with, is Alpha Mix in the Paddy Power Handicap Chase on Monday. At 8-1, rated 137, fast improving racing post rating. I think 1 in 3 miles, stepping up. I think just everything just looks lined up for him, and they are he is a race that they are definitely lining up a big handicap. It just looks like it's this one. Okay, so just finally from me, before we go, Big Chang requested to see the full-on Christmas experience from us this week: inflatable Santa suits, Christmas hats, tinsel, the works. Big Chang, we can only apologise. As you heard at the start, Kev's quite literally taken our entire Christmas budget for personal use. And as such, we're going to be holding a disciplinary hearing on Boxing Day. Look, I think it's unlikely he's going to be fired. Jono, I presume you're thinking the same. So he'll be back next week. But at the very least, he's going to get an health warning.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it from now. We'll be back between Christmas and New Year to discuss any shake-up in the markets, and we'll look at what races are still to come. We're probably going to get another day or two of Christmas racing when we do the next podcast. So I'll pop something on the website on Fat Jockey asking you to ask any questions for that period. We're not going to have too much time turnaround on that, unfortunately. So whether we're going to be able to, number one, get questions in, and number two, make them relevant, I don't know. But if we can, we will. So all I can say from my perspective is have a great Christmas, everybody, and have a very profitable Christmas festival. To you too as well, John. I've really enjoyed these this year. This has been a really good one. Again, apologies it's so long. We're still at the long end of these, but there's a lot of stuff to cover. So thanks for your company.
Yep, Merry Christmas, everyone, and same to you, Paul.
Cheers, guys. I shall catch you on the forum.
Guys.
See you next week.